The cabin had been listed for $3, not 3,000, not 300, $3, in a county auction nobody bothered to show up to, because everyone in Harlan County already knew what that cabin was. A collapsing wreck on a worthless hill, sitting on land that hadn't produced anything in 40 years except weeds, rumors, and regret. Everyone knew. Except Eli Cutter. Eli was 26 years old, worked nights at the lumber mill in Pineville, drove a truck with a cracked windshield, and had exactly $412 to his name the morning he walked into that county auction. He'd seen the listing on a corkboard outside the courthouse, hand-typed, barely legible, half covered by a flyer for a church rummage sale. Most people would have walked past it. Eli stopped. He bought the cabin for $3 and drove up to see it the same afternoon. The road to get there wasn't really a road. It was 2 dirt ruts through knee-high grass that scraped the underside of his truck the whole quarter-mile up the hill. When the cabin finally came into view, he sat in the truck for a long moment without getting out. It was worse than the listing suggested, which was saying something, because the listing had included the phrase "some structural concerns." One wall had partially caved inward. The porch boards had rotted through so completely that you could see the dark earth underneath. The tin roof had rusted into a patchwork of holes and near holes, and the single window on the east side had no glass in it at all, just a square opening where the weather came and went as it pleased. The whole structure leaned slightly to the left, as if it had been tired for a very long time, and was considering lying down. Eli got out of the truck. He walked around the cabin once, slow, the way you walk around something you're trying to understand. Then he went inside. What he noticed first was the fireplace. It was stone, real stone, river rock, stacked and mortared by someone who knew what they were doing, someone who had taken time and care on a thing meant to last. Everything else in that cabin was decay. The fireplace was not. It stood in the center of the south wall like the only honest thing left in the building, solid and square and untouched by the years that had eaten everything around it. Eli put his hand on the stone and felt the cold of it run up through his palm. He didn't know yet what the fireplace meant. He just knew it mattered. The people in town heard about the purchase the same week. Word travels fast in small counties, especially when it's the kind of word that comes with a joke attached. $3, said Dale Mosley at the hardware store, and shook his head the way people shake their heads when they're enjoying something more than they want to admit. Boy paid $3 for the Cutter place. The Cutter place? Said the man next to him. His granddaddy's old land. Didn't even know it, I'd wager. Just saw a cheap cabin and bought it. They laughed. Not cruelly, or not only cruelly, some of it was genuine amusement. The laughter of people who had seen enough of the world to find folly entertaining. Eli was young. He'd thrown $4 at a ruin on a hill. That was the kind of thing you laughed about. Eli's cousins laughed loudest. There were 3 of them, Marcus, Todd, and a younger one they all called Breck. And they had grown up hearing about the Cutter family land the way you hear about something that used to exist and doesn't anymore. A story told at Thanksgiving tables and gradually drained of any urgency because nobody believed there was anything left worth finding. When Eli bought the cabin, Marcus called him directly. "You paid $3 for a condemned building," Marcus said, "on land that ain't worth the property tax." "I paid $3 for something I wanted," Eli said. "It's gonna fall on your head," Marcus said, "and then you'll owe the county to haul it off." He paused. "You know there was talk, back in Grandpa's time, about something buried up there." Everybody looked. "Ain't nothing there, Eli. Then I got a cheap cabin," Eli said and hung up. What nobody said, and what Eli only half believed himself, was the other reason he'd stopped at that corkboard outside the courthouse. His grandfather, Harold Cutter, dead 12 years, had told him something once when Eli was 14 and his grandfather was already old and going soft at the edges. They'd been sitting on Harold's porch, and Harold had said, without preamble, without context, "There's something on that hill I never got around to finishing. Somebody should." Someday. He'd said it the way old men say things they've been carrying for decades and finally need to put down somewhere. Eli had been 14. He hadn't known what hill. He hadn't asked. He was 26 now, and he thought he knew. He started going up to the cabin every weekend. Not to fix it, not yet, not really, just to be in it, to understand it. He cleared the debris from the floor. He pulled the collapsed wall section away from the interior and stacked the wood outside. He found, under 30 years of accumulated junk and leaf fall and animal nesting, that the cabin's floor was wide plank pine, old growth, the kind of wood you can't buy anymore because the trees that made it don't exist anymore. He ran his hand along the boards and felt the grain of them. He started sleeping there on Saturdays. Just a sleeping bag on the pine floor, the old rusted key he'd found nailed above the fireplace, sitting on the hearth beside him, because it seemed wrong to leave it alone in an empty building. The key was big, old iron, heavy, the kind made for a lock that wasn't made anymore. He came back the next morning, and the one after that. He brought a broom, a crowbar, a box of garbage bags. He worked without a plan in the beginning, just clearing, the way you have to clear before you can see what you're dealing with. He found a cast iron skillet hanging on a nail inside the fireplace that was better than any skillet sold new today. He found mason jars in a wooden crate under the collapsed section of wall, sealed and empty, waiting. He found, scratched into one of the pine floorboards near the east wall, a set of initials and a year. H.C. 1961. Harold Cutter. His grandfather's initials, in a year that would have made Harold 32 years old. A young man building something he intended to last. Eli ran his thumb over the initials. He sat with them for a while. The nights were getting shorter, and the air had that particular smell of late summer turning, the way the leaves start to prepare themselves before they show it. And Eli started to understand that he wasn't just fixing a building. He was following something. A thread that had been laid down decades before he was born. By a man who had decided apparently that one person in the next generation would have the patience to follow it. He hoped he was that person. He was pretty sure he was. He kept showing up, which is most of what it takes. It fit nothing in the cabin. He didn't know what it opened, but his grandfather had hung it there deliberately, centered above the stone mantel, at eye level, where anyone standing at the fireplace would see it. You don't hang something like that by accident. His cousin Marcus showed up unannounced one Saturday morning in October, drove up the dirt ruts in a clean pickup that had never known a dirt road, and stood in the doorway of the cabin with his arms crossed and his expression carefully calibrated between pity and contempt. "You're sleeping here," Marcus said. It wasn't a question. "Weekends," Eli said. Marcus looked around. Eli had repaired 2 wall sections, replaced 4 porch boards, and cleared enough debris that the space was now recognizably a room rather than a pile of things. Marcus didn't acknowledge any of this. "There's a developer," Marcus said, "out of Knoxville. He's been buying up the hill parcels out this way, consolidating land for some kind of resort project. He came to me and Todd and Breck last week." He paused. "He wants this parcel too." "This parcel's mine," Eli said. "He's offering $40,000 for it." Eli was quiet for a moment. $40,000 was more money than he had made in the last 2 years combined. He thought about that. Then he thought about the fireplace. "Tell him no," Eli said. Marcus's jaw tightened. "Eli, it's a broken-down cabin on a hill. You paid $3. He's offering $40,000. That is a rational transaction. Tell him no, Eli said again. And Marcus, don't come up here without calling first. Marcus left without another word. But what Eli didn't know yet was that the developer, a man named Gary Sutton, who had made his money buying undervalued land and was not accustomed to hearing the word no from people with cracked windshields and $3 property purchases, had already spoken to a county assessor about the parcel's legal boundaries. And what Sutton had found, apparently, had made him very interested indeed. Eli found the tunnel on a Thursday in November, which he had taken off work because the mill was running a reduced schedule and he had nothing else to do, and the cabin was pulling at him the way unfinished things pull. He'd been working on the fireplace, not on the fireplace itself, which was solid and needed nothing, but on the floor in front of it, where one of the pine boards had developed a soft spot that he'd been meaning to address before cold weather set in and the ground under the cabin froze. He pulled the soft board up and found solid earth beneath it, as expected. But then he pulled up the board beside it, and the one beside that, and what he found was not earth. What he found was a wooden hatch set flush with the floor joists with iron hardware that matched the key on the mantel exactly. He sat back on his heels and looked at it for a long moment. Then he got up, got the old rusted key from the hearth, and came back to the hatch. The lock was stiff with age. He worked the key back and forth for 3 full minutes before it turned, and when it did, the hatch came up smoothly, as if the hinges had been oiled not long ago, which was impossible, and yet there it was. Below the hatch was a tunnel, not a root cellar, not a crawl space, a real tunnel, shored with timber, maybe 4 feet high and 3 feet wide, heading south from the cabin at a slight downward grade into the hillside. Eli got his flashlight from the truck. He went in. The tunnel ran about 60 feet into the hill. At the far end was a chamber, a room, really, maybe 10 by 12 feet, with timber walls and a plank floor and a shelf cut into the stone at the far end. On the shelf was a wooden box, sealed with a simple latch. Beside the box was a leather journal, its cover cracked and dry, with a piece of paper folded and tucked into the front cover. He opened the folded paper first. It was a letter, handwritten in his grandfather's handwriting, dated September 1987, 30 years ago. The letter said, "Eli, if you're reading this, then you found the key, and you found the hatch, and you had the sense to see what nobody else could see in that hill. I always believed you would. I am leaving this for you, and not for the others, because you are the only one in this family who ever looked at something broken and saw what it could become instead of what it was. The box has everything you need. The land goes deeper than the deed shows. Get a good lawyer before you tell anyone what you found." Harold, the box contained a deed, an original deed notarized for 340 acres on the hillside, not the 12 acres the county records showed, not the 12 acres Gary Sutton had been researching and pricing and quietly maneuvering to acquire. 340 acres. The deed was dated 1923 and had been recorded once in a county that had since been redistricted, its records scattered and never fully transferred to the new county's system. Harold Cutter had known he had kept the original, and he had hidden it here for exactly this reason, with exactly this note, for exactly this person. The leather journal was his grandfather's. It covered, in Harold Cutter's careful handwriting, nearly 20 years, from 1967 to 1986, and it documented, among other things, every survey he had ever commissioned on that hillside, every conversation he had had with county officials about the redistricted land records, every step he had taken to ensure the deed was both hidden and findable by the right person. There was an entry from June 1985, 2 years before he'd written the letter, I have been thinking about who to leave this for. Not the boys. They'll sell it before the ink dries. Eli's mother has good sense, but she won't be here forever. It has to be someone who will come looking, not because they expect to find something, but because they can't help looking. That's the one. Eli read that sentence 3 times in the light of his flashlight, sitting on the plank floor 60 feet inside a hill, and felt the particular weight of being known by someone who was no longer alive to know you. It was the strangest and most solid feeling he had ever had. He brought the box, the journal, and the letter up the tunnel, set them on the stone mantel of the fireplace, and sat down on the pine floor and did not move for a long time. The afternoon light came through the repaired window on the east side and made a rectangle on the floor beside him. A chickadee called somewhere outside once, and then was quiet. Eli sat on the plank floor of that underground room for a long time. Then he took out his phone and called the only lawyer he knew, a man named Patterson, who had handled a small traffic matter for him 2 years ago, and who, it turned out, knew exactly who to call about a 1923 deed to 340 acres of Harlan County hillside that happened to sit directly over one of the most significant natural spring systems in eastern Kentucky. The springs were what Sutton had found in the county assessor's records. Not the deed. He hadn't known about the deed. Nobody had. But the springs. Water rights in that part of Kentucky for a resort development of the kind Sutton was planning were worth far more than any cabin or any acreage. He had been planning to acquire the 12 acres he believed Eli owned, establish surface rights, and build from there. He didn't know about the other 328 acres, or the springs on them. Patterson turned out to be the right kind of lawyer. Not dramatic, not expensive, just thorough in the way that matters when thoroughness is what stands between you and losing something that's rightfully yours. He drove up to the cabin the week after Eli called him, climbed down into the tunnel with a flashlight and a legal pad, examined the deed, photographed everything, and came back up the ladder with the expression of a man doing careful arithmetic in his head. "How long have you been sitting on this?" he asked. "Found it Thursday," Eli said. Patterson looked at the fireplace, then at the hatch, then at Eli. "Your grandfather was a deliberate man," he said. "Yes, sir," Eli said. "He was. He also knew what this land was worth," Patterson said, "and he knew someone would come looking eventually. The fact that he recorded the original deed in a county that got redistricted in 1974, that's not an accident. That's protection. He wanted the record to exist, but not be easy to find." He paused. "The water rights alone, on 340 acres with a natural spring system of this size, are worth more than anything Sutton offered you." "I know," Eli said. "He probably doesn't know you know that yet," Patterson said. "He will," Eli said. Patterson filed the deed with the new county within the week. He also filed a formal objection to a development permit Sutton had quietly applied for, on the grounds that the applicant did not have clear title to the land in question. Sutton's lawyers called Patterson. Patterson was polite and unhurried in the way that lawyers are polite and unhurried when they know they have the better hand. Sutton himself appeared 3 weeks after the filing, without warning, in a silver SUV that looked as out of place on that dirt road as a tuxedo at a barn raising. He was younger than Eli had expected, maybe 45, with the build of someone who had once been an athlete and had been in meetings ever since. He got out of the SUV and looked at the cabin and then at Eli, who was on the porch with a cup of coffee, and he had the expression of a man recalibrating. "Mr. Cutter," he said. "I'm Gary Sutton. I think we should talk directly, without lawyers." "You can talk to Patterson," Eli said. "Patterson's going to tell you to hold out for more money," Sutton said. "I'm here to tell you that the money I'm offering is fair and the alternative, litigation over a 1923 deed in a redistricted county, is going to cost both of us years." "It might," Eli said. "How long have you been planning this development?" Sutton paused. 2 years. And in those 2 years, did you ever come up this road? Another pause. No, I've been up this road every weekend since August, Eli said. I slept on that floor all of November. I found what was here to find because I showed up and looked. He set down his coffee. The answer is still no, Mr. Sutton. Not 40,000. Not 400,000. This land is not for sale. Sutton looked at him for a long moment. Then he nodded, not warmly, but with something that was almost respect, the way a chess player acknowledges a good move even when it beats him. Patterson's a good lawyer, Sutton said. He is, Eli agreed. Sutton got back in his SUV and drove back down the dirt ruts and didn't come back. His development permit application was withdrawn 4 months later. Marcus called Eli the day after the filing. His voice had a different quality than it had had in the cabin doorway in October. Eli, he said, we should talk about the land, about what this means for the family. Eli thought about his grandfather's letter. The land goes deeper than the deed shows. Get a good lawyer before you tell anyone what you found. He thought about Marcus standing in the doorway of the cabin with his arms crossed, looking at the repaired walls without seeing them. Marcus, Eli said quietly, you told me there was nothing up there. A silence. I should have looked harder, Marcus said. Yes, Eli said, you should have. He paused. I'll talk to Patterson about the family's interests, but I'm not selling to Sutton. That land stays in the family. He meant family the way his grandfather had meant it, the people who look at broken things and see what they could become. By the following spring, the cabin on the hill had a new roof, real metal, not rusted tin. The porch had been rebuilt with the old pine boards where they were sound, and new ones where they weren't, and on warm evenings, Eli sat on that porch and watched the light go off the hills and thought about his grandfather spending a September afternoon in 1987 carrying a box down a tunnel, sealing a hatch, hanging a key above a fireplace, leaving it all for someone who hadn't been born yet. He thought about the kind of faith that takes, not faith in God exactly, though there was some of that, but faith in a specific person, in a specific quality of attention, in the belief that somewhere down the line there would be someone in this family who would stop at a corkboard outside a courthouse and see what was worth seeing. The cabin on the hill looked different in spring. Eli had spent the winter months working on it steadily, a weekend at a time, after mill shifts, with scavenged lumber and borrowed tools, and the particular satisfaction of a man who knows what he's building toward. The roof held. The porch held. The pine floors, cleaned and refinished, caught the light the way old wood catches light. Not with shine, but with depth. The way something looks when it has been through a lot and is still standing. One Sunday that May, the neighbors came up the hill uninvited. Not to mock, this time, but to see. 4 families from the valley below, people who had watched the truck go up and down that dirt road all winter and had grown curious. They came with food. Someone brought a covered dish of beans. Someone else brought cornbread. They sat on the porch and on the steps and on the new grass of the yard and ate in the long afternoon light, and as the light faded, fireflies started up in the tree line. Someone had brought a guitar and played it quietly at the edge of the porch, old songs everyone knew without knowing they knew them, the kind of songs that come back from somewhere in childhood. Eli looked out at the hills going blue in the dusk and thought, this is what my grandfather was building, not the cabin. This, the possibility of an evening like this, on a hill that almost got sold to a developer for $40,000, and the developer's idea of what a hill is worth. He knew what a hill was worth. He had learned it by showing up. Sometimes the moments that look like your worst mistake are not mistakes at all. Sometimes the thing everyone laughs at is precisely the thing you were meant to find. Harold Cutter knew that. He spent 30 years waiting to see if someone else in his family would know it too. And Eli Cutter, 26 years old, with a cracked windshield and $400 and the stubbornness to stop at a corkboard when everyone else walked past, he knew it. Has anyone ever laughed at something you did that turned out to be exactly what you needed? If this story stayed with you, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. Share this with someone who's been told they're wasting their time on something that matters to them. Leave a comment. Where are you watching from today? We read every one. Until the next story. My grandfather left me something better than money, Eli said. The first time someone asked him what he'd found in that hill, he left me proof that he knew me.